Today we're taking a ride in the all-new Toyota BZ4X. Not the automaker's first fully electric crossover. That honor belongs to the first and then second generation RAV4 EV, but this is the first one that's going to be available nationwide, whereas the previous ones were only really available in select markets on the West Coast. So we're taking it for a spin today and seeing how it stacks up against the competition. Now for scale, the BZ4X is around the same size as Toyota's RAV4, though from nose to tail, it's 3.7 inches longer. And more interestingly, its wheelbase is 6.3 inches longer. Now, pushing the wheels out to the corner like that make this look like a more squat and planted vehicle, despite its roof height and ride height being around the same as its gasoline-powered cousin. Now, it's built on Toyota's new electric vehicle platform, but Toyota hasn't made room under the hood for a frunk like you'd get on the Mustang Mach-E. You'd think if you're building an electric vehicle from the ground up, you'd take advantage of that, but they didn't. Of course, the elephant in the room is the aesthetic. Now, it looks a little bit better in this dark color where those fender flares aren't emphasized as much, but the hammerhead style front end and the equally wild style rear end are not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Let's get back on the road. Now, before we hit the road, we've got to talk about the interior here, starting with this very odd steering wheel and steering column combo. You've got about this much range of motion, but because of the positioning of the 7-inch digital instrument cluster, you've got to keep the wheel nice and low so that you can see over it rather than through it like you would with most other vehicles. And that leads to what looks like a very awkward looking seating position, particularly with the design of this wheel. Now, in the middle, we've got either an 8-inch or, in this case, a 12.3-inch version of Toyota's infotainment system. We've seen this system previously in the new Tundra, except for here, we don't have a volume knob. We've got volume buttons, and that's annoying me to no small end. Further down, we've got our knob-type shifter. You push in and to the right for drive, click back to the left for reverse, and then there's a button for park. And flanking it, we've got our buttons for drive modes, which we'll come back to in a moment. Now, Toyota BZ4X is available with two different powertrain options. Today, we're in the all-wheel drive version with a 72.8 kilowatt-hour battery pack. Its dual motors combine to output 214 horsepower and 248 pound-feet of torque, and it can sprint from 0 to 60 in around 6.5 seconds. In this configuration, you're looking at around 228 miles of range for the lighter XLE model, or 222 miles for the more heavily equipped Limited. Now, the difference between the BZ4X and its mechanically identical twin, the Subaru Solterra, is that the BZ4X is also available with front-wheel drive, where the Subaru is an all-wheel drive only affair. Here you're looking at a 71.4 kilowatt-hour battery with a different battery chemistry from the all-wheel drive version. Now, we'll get into the nitty-gritty details of why that is in our full first drive review over on CNET. But its single motor is good for 201 horsepower and 196 pound-feet of torque, and it can still sprint to 60 in a respectable 7.1 seconds. In this configuration, you're looking at 252 miles for the XLE or 242 miles for Limited. Now, there's also a difference between the charging speeds for these two different battery packs because their chemistry is different. All-wheel drive versions can charge it up to 100 kilowatts. Front-wheel drive versions can go a little bit faster at 150 kilowatts, but either way, you're looking at around an hour for a 20 to 80% charge at a DC fast charging station. Now, on paper, the performance and range maybe aren't as impressive as some of the best in this class, like the Kia EV6 or the Mustang Mach-E, but on the road, it's still a pretty competent feeling vehicle. You're not going to feel like there's not enough grunt when you're just driving around on city streets. The ride is also a touch softer than a lot of the competition, which makes it a little bit more of a comfortable ride, actually. So that's not exactly a bad thing for a commuter style vehicle. And we also shouldn't overlook the extra ground clearance. At around 8 inches, it's more in line with the likes of Subaru's Forester or Toyota's own RAV4, making this potentially a better pick for drivers who occasionally have to drive on dirt roads or in snow than the low-slung electric crossovers it competes with. Now, further boosting the off-road advantage when you have the all-wheel drive version of this vehicle are the X-Mode driving modes. These are going to be borrowed from the Subaru Solterra, this vehicle's mechanical twin, and they're going to add bespoke modes for dirt and snow and deep snow and mud that are going to give it a little bit more sure-footedness when you go off of the pavement. And finally, there is a one-pedal driving mode. Not a true one-pedal driving mode that brings it to a complete stop, but enough that you get maximum regen when you lift off of the pedal. The all-new Toyota BZ4X starts at $43,215, including destination charges. Now, if you want all-wheel drive like we've got today, go ahead and add $2,000 to that bottom line. Now, the top spec with all the bells and whistles, the limited all-wheel drive, is around the $50,000 mark. Now, in that price range, it's not a bad deal. It's nicely equipped and the performance is pretty good. The problem is that it's got some pretty stiff competition from the Ioniq 5, the EV6, and the Mustang Mach-E. All compact electric crossovers that I think I'd rather be driving than this. So maybe it's not the most exciting vehicle in this class, but it's a solid choice. I want to know, what do you think about Toyota's BZ4X? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to check out our full first drive over on cnet.com, where, like I said, we've got even more details and driving impressions.